All right, we're taking a look at oil prices today, sliding 4.5% earlier in the session as Venezuelan oil exports jumped in January, thanks to a surge in U.S. investment into that country.
Our own Grady Trimble has more from Chicago.
Hey, Brian and Jackie. Chevron CEO Mike Wirth told Maria this morning he expects the company will be able to increase production in Venezuela by 50% in the next 2 years. President Trump announced the U.S. has struck a deal with India. As part of that deal, India will buy oil from Venezuela instead of Iran. The president is also inviting China to do the same. Wirth, Chevron's chief executive, is optimistic about growth in that South American country after the U.S. captured its dictator, Nicolas Maduro, last month.
And we've got a significant head start in capturing some of the longer-term potential, I think, that exists in the country. We've been there for most of the last 100 years. We've been an important partner in the development and growth of Venezuela. We're being repaid debt that we're owed, and others that have left have had more difficulty with that.
And oil prices fell after President Trump signaled his administration is in talks with Tehran to avert further strikes in Iran. Oil markets were concerned a potential strike would limit oil supply, but those worries eased after President Trump said this.
If you could make a negotiated deal that would be satisfactory with no nuclear weapons, they should do that, but I don't know that they will, but they are talking to us, seriously talking to us.
So you can see, Brian and Jackie, despite the distance between these two countries, developments in Venezuela are directly impacting Iran and really the rest of the world, because what happens with them sets oil prices all over the globe. Jackie, Brian?
Grady, thank you so much.
Thanks, sir. President Trump is not just using energy dominance to pressure Iran into a deal. He's hoping these moves bring about world peace. The president posting on Truth Social, Indian Prime Minister Modi, quote, agreed to stop buying Russian oil and to buy much more from the United States and potentially Venezuela, adding, quote, this will help end the war in Ukraine.
For more on this, let's bring in former National Security Council Chief of Staff Alex Gray. Alex, it's good to see you. And I'll just add to the setup that Brian did right there and say not only does it put pressure on Putin to end the war in Ukraine, but the Indians also were buying oil from Iran. And the situation in the Middle East right now, specifically with that country and the Ayatollah, is very tense. Grady played a clip from the weekend when the president was talking about trying to strike a deal. But I believe the most recent comments from him said if he can't strike a deal with Iran, that it would be very bad. And in fact, it would. He usually chooses, however, to go the economic route when he can. So the more pressure he can put with respect to oil and revenue that they're taking in, the more it helps his position.
Well, I think that's 100% correct. And I think the president's playing this kind of multidimensional game where what we do in Venezuela frees up oil that allows India to diversify its source of supply. We're able to have a closer strategic relationship with India, which is good for deterring China. And the president's really looking at this strategic global chessboard, and he's moving all the pieces in a really fascinating and a way we haven't seen American presidents operate in a long time, probably since Nixon. The president's also, I think, looking at Iran, and he's saying, you know, we don't want a perpetual state of war in the Middle East. The president's been campaigning against that for a decade, but we have to have the type of deterrence, and we have to have an environment where the Iranian Ayatollahs know that if they do things that are against American security interests, you'll have an American president who will act decisively. And I think that's what he's trying to create, the equilibrium he's trying to create right now.
Let me stay on the oil thing for a second and ask you this. I get wanting to involve India in Venezuelan oil, makes sense to me. The president says he would also be interested in inviting China to make an investment in Venezuelan oil. Now, I kind of thought that the goal was to get China out of the Western Hemisphere, out of the Panama Canal. That's the whole Greenland thing. Why would you want to invite him into Venezuela?
Well, I think if having China come into Venezuela on our we're allowing them in. I think the problem was when they were coming in as the dominant player in the Venezuelan energy space, and they were, in many ways, replacing us as the dominant actor in parts of the Western Hemisphere. If they're coming in on the sufferance of the United States because Donald J. Trump says that Xi Jinping can have some involvement in Venezuelan oil, I think that's totally fine. I just don't want a China that's the dominant power, and clearly President Trump doesn't either.
Yeah, and I think the president is thinking you can't cut China off completely, but you don't want them buying from Russia and you don't want them buying from Iran. So you do have to have an area of replacement supply as well. But we're also looking at this situation. The nuclear talks are planned for Friday. There's a military buildup in the region. The president is very serious about this. Alex, my read on this is that we took the nuclear facility out in July. So I don't really see what these talks are moving toward. Iran has repeatedly lied. Is this sort of just a way for President Trump to say, look, we tried everything?
I think the president genuinely does want to use the old phrase, peace a chance, but I think he has no problem using surgical military force when necessary. And as you said, the Iranians have been very clear. The missile program, which is a direct threat to both us and our Gulf Arab allies and Israel, is not on the table. They've said that they won't talk about the nuclear program beyond a certain degree, and they're probably reconstituting their proxy militias, the Hezbollahs and the Islamic Jihads. So there's really not a lot for us to negotiate with. But again, I think the president wants to exhaust every option, have this deterrent capability in the region, this big Navy armada, and then be able to operate from a position of strength once it's clear there's no other option.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so clarify that for me. Alex, operate from a position of strength. I get it. The ships are there. The military assets are there. I don't see how you can trust anybody running Iran. So basically what you're saying is he's either inviting these guys to leave now or we're going to take you out, and you got to make the choice pretty quick. Is that what it amounts to at this point?
I think there's some of that, but I also think that, look, the president was very clear with the Iranians that if they attack their own people, if they crack down on the protesters in a violent, deadly manner like they did, he was going to take decisive action against them. And that's, I think, as part of our credibility, part of what we have to do to maintain deterrence globally. This is the Joe Biden problem, right? You say things, and then you end up empowering the bad guys, whether it's in Asia or it's in Ukraine. You have to say what you mean and mean what you say, which Donald Trump always has in his decades in public life. And so I think what he's trying to do here is say, look, if you go and you do things the American president explicitly tells you not to do, there will be very real consequences.
Yeah. When he draws a red line, he means it, Donald Trump, and he's made that very clear. And also, with respect to deterrence, I mean, that was a tactic that Joe Biden just never used when it came to Russia or Ukraine, but it can be very effective. Alex, thank you.